Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week's video is longer, but trust me, it's totally worth it. I'm sharing my most recent SEO presentation packed with tons of new info. I'm actually in Tampa, Florida today at the Digital Dealer Conference, the first in-person event I've spoken at since before the pandemic hit. I'm doing an epic back-to-back double session on local SEO, and I wanted to share the presentation with you since it's packed with awesome info. I'm breaking it up into two 45-minute segments, so today's video will be about 45 minutes long and cover the first half of my presentation. I don't want to waste any more time, so let's get to it. Hey, I'm Greg Gifford, and this is the post-COVID guide to automotive SEO in 2021. Gain visibility and attract more local customers. And most of you have probably seen me speak at conferences in the past, and you know that my slides have a little bit more to them. So let's switch to the themed title slide. The post-COVID guide to automotive SEO in 2021. Gain visibility and attract more local customers. I'm the Vice President of Search for SearchLab. You've seen me. I've spoken at Digital Dealer pretty much every time for the last 10 years. The important thing here, I want to make sure you check out my weekly video series called Local Search Tuesdays. It's short, quick, easy, helpful tips every Tuesday to help you get more visibility in searches. And for those of you that don't know, I speak at a ton of conferences. Outside of COVID, I typically speak at anywhere from 25 to 30 events worldwide. When COVID hit last year, I already had 8 conferences booked in 8 different countries, even though it was only March when everything got shut down. So I speak at a lot of conferences, and at a lot of these conferences, you see really, really bad presenters. You know, these people stand right behind the podium and just not move. And a lot of times they'll have their back to the crowd and they just read the slides behind them, and it's really not engaging at all. And even worse, a lot of times the background of the slide is just plain white and it's black Arial font, and it's just lots of bullet points on the slides, and they just read bullet point after bullet point. And because of that, I firmly believe that bullet points kill kittens, and today's presentation will be entirely kitten safe. And again, those of you that know me know that I do the movie thing. I've got a full sleeve of movie portrait tattoos. You can see just the edge there. I just got a new one. I'm working on my left arm sleeve, and my whole right leg is all stuff from the Goonies. So I love to share my love of movies whenever I talk about SEO and digital marketing. So there's always a theme, and today's theme is car movies. So any movie where cars played a significant role in the plot of a film. We've got 195 references in the next almost 2 hours of time here for this mega presentation. And one thing that I also do with the theme is I go back and include at least one movie for every year in the last 50 years so that we've got lots of examples. But today we're going back 59 years because I'm a massive fan of James Bond, and we got to go back 59 years so we can have every James Bond movie in there because the cars are important in James Bond movies, as we all know. So let's kick it off. Why the long face? Are you spending too much time looking up at competitors that rank higher than your dealership does in local search results? Are you even wondering, dude, where's my dealership site? Sometimes you might even feel like you're hanging on to your rankings for dear life. And a lot of times it seems like your competitors might be murdering you in the search results. But today, I'm going to give you a peek underneath Google's hood so you'll understand what Google's looking at when it determines which sites are going to be shown better in local search results. In fact, there's a lot of stuff in here that's for your eyes only. Haha, James Bond joke. I'm going to show you how to get your dealership to stand out and grab attention so that you'll be able to attract more customers and grow your dealership in the upcoming months and next year. And just like a fat guy in a little coat, I'm going to squeeze in a ton of stuff. I've got 283 slides to share with you today and only a little under 2 hours to do it. So let's get going. We've got to start by talking about the elephant in the room. COVID hit us, changed life as we know it, and it's changed customer behavior. The way that people search and the way that people do business has been changed forever by COVID at a fundamental level. And there's still a lot of dealers that I talk to that are out there waiting for things to go back to normal, but you have to stop doing that. COVID has changed that behavior permanently. And, you know, another big important thing that we're all dealing with, we've got the chip shortage. There's a lot of inventory that we're not able to get onto the lot because there aren't chips to be able to create those cars and deliver them to the dealership. So as long as we have this chip shortage, we're going to have a shortage of inventory. And this is something that's going to last for at least another year. But we know that anytime someone is looking for a place to do business with, especially when we're talking about car dealerships, they're going to buy a car, they're going to come in for service, or they're looking for parts. They're going to start that with a search on Google. We also know that today's customer shops around. We don't have the good old days of people going into multiple dealerships and doing multiple test drives. Everyone does their research online. And then when they actually show up at the dealership, it's probably because they're already far enough down that funnel that that's where they're going to buy the car that they're going to buy. Or obviously, if they show up for service, that's where they're getting service. But we know they're going to look around first. So they're going to see your competitors. It's a fact of life. A customer that's coming to you has already been to your competitor's website and checked out what they've had to offer. So to show up better, to attract those customers, your site has to have the best answer to the questions that those searchers are asking to show up better in search results. And then you've got to have an awesome website experience, a great user experience on your site so that you're going to win those customers because they're going to check out everybody that's got a good answer. Just having the best answer isn't enough. You have to have the best answer and an awesome website experience. So there's some studies that were released towards the end of last year that really highlight how customer behavior has changed and what that shift means for digital marketing. So let's take a look at those first. Accenture did a study that showed that 46% of American consumers are more likely to shop in closer neighborhood stores because of the pandemic. People don't want to travel a long distance. They want to get somewhere quick and easy that's close to home. And 59% of consumers are more likely to use curbside pickup even when the restrictions from the pandemic have been lifted. So what that means is, sure, we don't really have curbside pickup for vehicles, but you may have curbside pickup or curbside pickup or delivery for service. People could drop their car off and come back and get it. Or you may even have a concierge service or whatever that might be, curbside pickup for parts. The important bit here is people expect to use the expanded levels and alternate levels of service that businesses offer now, even when there aren't restrictions in place because of the pandemic. And 56% of consumers say that they rely on reviews to make informed purchase decisions. Now, this is really important because we know that reviews are important in automotive, but we know now that because of the pandemic, people are really relying on those reviews to make their decision about where they want to buy. And 70% of internet users across the globe have been shown to be using their smartphones more as a direct result of the pandemic, which means we already knew that mobile search was on the rise and a lot of dealerships have more traffic happening on mobile than on desktop. But now that's really accelerated and most people are using their phones even more and doing more searches there. So it's time to change the way that you approach SEO and think about SEO. It's always been kind of this fringe thing for most dealers for a long time. It's here to stay. It's really important. In fact, SEO is your most important marketing channel in 2021 and moving forward. Search engine optimization, doing the things that you need to do to get your site to show up better in local searches is the most important marketing thing that you can do for your dealership. Most SEO vendors out there are using really outdated tactics, and that's an important thing to understand. You want to make sure you're choosing the right vendor partner to work with. So you need to understand which tactics are actually going to move the needle. And we're going to talk about that today so you will understand how to choose the right partner to work with. The big problem in automotive is this crazy OEM approved system. It's the only vertical in the world that has a manufacturer or a third party that works for the manufacturer say, these are the small handful of approved vendors that you can use to do your website and to do your digital marketing. And the problem is it's not actually good for your dealership. This program is not in your best interest. And here's why. To get into the program, you have to offer specifically locked-in packages. Once you become an OEM-approved vendor for digital marketing, whether that's SEO or PPC, you have to offer that locked-in package. There is no room for customization. You also have to take any dealership that wants to sign up, which means you could have markets where there are a significant number of competitors. Let's look at the Dallas-Fort Worth market. There's probably 24 dealerships in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, but because of the way the OEM-approved program works, any Ford dealer is allowed to sign up for any Ford-approved vendor that they want to sign up for, which results in a situation that half of the people or even more in that market could be using the same vendor. And if you're paying your vendor to get you the best visibility and search results, how could that vendor also be doing the same thing for your competitors? It doesn't make sense. They also have to provide the exact same service for every dealership that they work with. And if you're a Ford dealer in Dallas, you need different tactics than a Ford dealer in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, where there's not another Ford dealer for 250 miles in any direction. And even better than that, a Mercedes dealer needs different tactics than a Kia dealer. So it's important to understand that. So like I mentioned, because of all this together, that means that that Ford dealer in Dallas gets the exact same strategy, the exact same service as the Ford dealer in the middle of Wyoming. How's that going to help either one of them? So you've got to think, when you're looking at a partner, how is that cookie cutter generic SEO service supposed to help your dealership? It's not going to help. You need a customized strategy if you want the best results, which means you either need to hire someone in-house to handle it for you, or you need to work with a vendor that is outside of the OEM approved program so that they can truly provide service that's going to help your dealership. It's the best ROI. And that partner or that internal employee, if you hire someone in-house, has to keep up with the updates that Google rolls out. Google rolls out a ton of updates. In fact, over 3,000 updates were released last year alone. So it's important to understand this, because Google's releasing these little tweaks here and there, but they don't say anything about it. But Google will announce major updates when Google knows that those major updates are going to affect the results. This update's going to affect a significant portion of the sites that show up. So we're going to announce this update so that you're able to prepare for it. You have to keep up with that. You can't keep using the same strategies you were using 5 or 6 years ago, because that was before lots of big updates would have changed the way that Google is looking at signals. So let's go in and look at your Google Analytics. Pull up your Google Analytics account. If you look, organic traffic from Google is your biggest source of website traffic, unless you're not doing SEO and you've never done SEO and you're in a crowded market. Then it's probably likely you've got some other sources that might be bigger because you're not showing up well in searches. And it's also possible, maybe you're one of those stores that spends 40 or 50 grand a month on paid search. So maybe that paid search traffic's going to be a little bit bigger source. But for the vast majority of dealerships in the United States, organic traffic from Google is by far your largest source of traffic. And not only that, it's your largest source of leads. In fact, for most dealerships out there, you're going to get more traffic from Google Organic than from every other source combined, and more leads from Google Organic than every other source combined. But most dealers don't really have any problem spending money on paid search, because paid search is easy to understand. I put money in, I get clicks, I get results, A, B, C, easy money spent. They'll spend thousands and thousands. But when it comes to SEO, it's a little harder to understand. So people are really reluctant. I want to pick the cheapest SEO thing I can pick just so that I know I've got that box checked off. But that doesn't make sense, because we just talked about the fact that it's your biggest potential source of leads. Why would you not put more money into that than anything else when that has the biggest return? And a lot of times, I've been saying this for years, that you have to have a great provider that understands your dealership and your needs. And I'll talk to dealers that say, well, you know, my SEO guy, he's good enough. But this is your biggest source of traffic. Good enough isn't good enough. You need somebody that's awesome, that's passionate, that understands everything that matters, and does the right things that align with the goals of your dealership. So if SEO is your most important channel, it's your most important investment as well. So stop choosing the cheapest SEO provider. You get what you pay for. When you're thinking about buying SEO, it's not like a software or a website host, that you're buying technology, you're literally almost looking at it like an attorney. Now, it's not like an attorney where every time you talk, it gets added on more and more and more, but it is similar to an attorney in that you're buying a bucket of hours. With SEO, you are paying for time, whether you're paying for the time of the person in-house that's on your staff that's doing SEO, or whether you're paying for time for that SEO vendor partner who's doing the work for you. That's what you're paying for. So if you cheap out on what you're paying, you're getting lower quality and less time spent on what is realistically the most important thing that your dealership should be investing in. So you also need to stop choosing your SEO provider based on whether or not you can use co-op funds. Again, the OEM approved program typically kind of forces your hand and tells you you really should be picking one of these 3 or 4 vendors, because we're going to use co-op funds to cover it and it doesn't come out of your bottom line. But who cares? It's like burning monopoly money. It means nothing in the real world. If that's the one driver on who you're going to pick to do your SEO, who cares? Because that means you're going to be using the same guy that your competitor's using and that your other competitor's using, and that's doing half the dealerships in town. And that doesn't make sense. Who cares if you need to spend a couple grand of your own money if it's money that's better spent that helps your dealership grow? You need to, whoops, I put the wrong button there. You need to stop buying a used Ford Pinto and expecting the results you'd get from buying a badass Mercedes. And that's what happens a lot of times in automotive SEO. You're picking the cheapest provider, paying with co-op money. So you're buying that 40-year-old beat up Pinto, but you're expecting, I just bought a brand new G-Wagon and I'm going to be the most kick-ass ride on the road. It doesn't work that way. Please stop worrying so much about how your dealership ranks. You don't hire someone to do SEO to get you to rank. You hire someone to do SEO to grow your traffic. Keyword rankings are not a valid metric for success because keyword rankings change all the time. If you use a valid rank tracker, someone that actually tracks local rankings, you're going to see every day that your rankings go up and down. And it's based on the location of the person doing the search, the keyword search, the time of day, what your competition is doing, what a lot of different factors are. Each individual person is going to see different search results based on their personal search history. So rank tracking is more for a high level trend. Do not concentrate on it and worry about it on a daily basis because it is not a realistic view of how you actually show up in searches. Something like 20% of the search queries entered every single day have never been entered into Google before. So how would you use a rank tracker to even check that? There's a video here from my series that you should go watch. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to present different pieces of information and say, hey, if you want to dig in a little bit more, go watch this video. There's always going to be a video thumbnail like this, and there'll be a blue link. Now, keep in mind, if you're writing notes down, and you're writing these links down, you've got to write them in lowercase because they are case-sensitive links. But that will take you directly to the video so that you can watch, and I go into a lot of explanation of why it's not a valid success metric. But the most important thing is keyword rankings don't mean squat to your bottom line. I could tell you how you rank for 1,000 keywords, but you can't take that and tie that in to say, I've got an ROI from SEO. What really matters is the things that tie into your bottom line. Are you getting more traffic? Are you getting more leads? And like I mentioned a minute ago, 20% of search queries have never been asked before. So rank tracking is not going to matter for you. You do not hire an SEO partner or an in-house SEO to get your dealership's site to rank in searches. You hire SEO. You do SEO because you want to grow your traffic and you want to get more phone calls and more form fills and more chats. That's why you do SEO. And most searches are happening on mobile devices. We've known that for a while, but COVID has accelerated that. And the important thing here is mobile search results are inherently localized. When you search on this device, Google knows where you're located, either by your cell phone triangulation, if you've got a GPS chip in the phone, or even if you're searching and you're on a Wi-Fi network, it knows the location of the IP address. So Google is going to localize those search results. And local SEO is the strategy of targeting localized search results. So it's important to understand that local SEO is what you need. And it's crazy. Some of you are like, geez, man, you've been talking about this for a while. In fact, I've been talking about local SEO at every digital dealer since 2011 in I think it was Orlando that year. I don't remember, but I started at the Spring Digital Dealer in 2011 talking about local SEO. And I talk about it every time. And there's still always dealers that are like, oh, really? I hadn't heard of that before. Local SEO is what you need. But most dealers still don't know what it is. And most of the vendors in automotive SEO and most SEO vendors that are not vertical specific just do regular traditional SEO where there's no local focus. Now, there is overlap in the signals that matter. If you're doing traditional SEO, a lot of the signals are the same signals that the local algorithm looks at as well. So there's overlap. Doing regular SEO is still going to be beneficial, and not like the OEM approved SEO vendors aren't going to help. They'll help a little bit because they're doing the right sorts of things and hitting some of the right signals. But local SEO is 100% more effective for your dealership. If we were going to do a Venn diagram, it would look like this. The traditional circle is what most SEO agencies are going to be doing for you. The blue circle is what they're going to be doing if they're doing local SEO. Now, the green bit in the middle where we do the cool color combination, if you're doing traditional SEO, that green bit is the part of strategy and tactics that that traditional person is doing that's going to actually matter for your dealership. Versus if they're doing local SEO, 100% of everything is going to matter for your dealership. It's important to understand that Google's local algorithm is a different algorithm. Google's going to assess the intent of the person that's doing the search and choose the right algorithm to return the best search results. So for certain types of businesses, Google knows that that person is looking for results in the local immediate area, and it's going to use that local algorithm. The local algorithm is much more complex because it looks at additional signals both on your site and off your site that aren't included in Google's regular algorithm. Regular SEO pays no attention to your actual location or your Google My Business or your reviews or any of those things. So there's more to do when we're talking about local SEO. And something that I like to do is boil things down to the most simple concept, because SEO can get pretty complex. So if we take Google and boil it down to the simplest concept, Google is really just really advanced pattern detection. That's all Google does. It detects and analyzes patterns. So if we know that, then basically if you want better visibility in searches, you need a better pattern than what other dealerships in your market have. You want to have a better pattern so that Google sees that you have a better pattern and analyzes that pattern and says, this guy should show up higher and more often in search results. All searches with dealership intent. I'm going to buy a car. Not I'm looking for information about a car, but I am intent to find out specific information on this car because you can tell that I am looking to buy this car. Or if I'm looking for service or parts, those searches are all served search results using the local algorithm in Google. So you'll see things like the map pack. You'll do a search like this. I just said Ford dealer. I didn't even specify a location, but because I'm just north of Dallas, Google knows that's where I am. It's going to show me Ford dealers in that particular area, and that's what I get. That's the local algorithm at play. So local search, local SEO is what we're talking about. The easiest way to know if you actually need this or not, because hey, don't take my word for it just because I'm sitting here talking about it. Go test it for yourself. See for yourself if this really matters. So take a couple of your keyword phrases and go search for them in Google. The biggest key indicator, like I just showed you, is you get what's called the map pack. You're going to get the 3 results underneath a map. That's the map pack. Google is clearly saying these are localized search results. Now you can click view all down at the bottom, and that takes you to the local finder page that goes beyond just the top 3 results. This is also Google's local algorithm. Or you could go directly to Google Maps and do a search on Google Maps. That is also the local algorithm. But notice the search results are a little bit different. When we're looking here on the local finder where we've come off of the map pack, you can see that radius on the Dallas area is much wider. But if we go directly to Google Maps, it's a little bit tighter radius. So Google knows there's a little bit of a difference in intent there. But also below that map pack in the original search that we're doing, You're going to see the regular organic results, but these are actually localized as well. So this is also served up by that local algorithm. So when we're talking about how these search results are displayed, there are three major factors that are going to affect that. Number one, relevance. Number two, prominence. And number three, proximity, because we're talking the local algorithm. So relevance, does the website have all of the attributes that the searcher is looking for? So, hey, I'm looking for a car dealer. Does this website belong to a car dealer? If it's a car dealer, cool, it makes the cut. So the first thing it does, checks relevance. It gets a list of all of the things that meet that query. So in this case, I'm looking for a Ford dealer. It's going to take all the Ford dealers in my area, put them on a list. Then prominence. Does the website stand out from other search results? It's going to evaluate the factors both on and off the site to determine which sites are better, which sites are more popular. And so it's going to take that list and then sort that list based on prominence. So the most prominent site is going to show up at the top, but it's also going to consider proximity. How close is each of these search results to the physical location of the person that's doing the search? So all of those play together to determine what's going to show up as a search result. If you need more help understanding how local search works, I like to use pizza. And I actually did a video about this one, so you can go to bit.ly/pizza-local-SEO. But pizza is a great way, because if you search pizza delivery at the dealership, you get a list of spots by the dealership. If you search the same search, same two words, pizza delivery at home, you get different results. Most people don't think about it, but if you think about it, you type the same thing in twice and got two totally different sets of results. That's Google's local algorithm at play. And then once you understand how it works, you may wonder, do you really need it or not? And so I did a video about that too. You can see it at bit.ly/SEO-math-proof. Basically, this is more of an argument for why your dealership needs to do local SEO. At a high level, let's say that there's 5 franchise dealers and 15 independent dealers in your town, which gives you 20 dealerships in your market. There's only 13 spots on page 1 because you got 3 in the map pack and 10 underneath, which right there alone, only 13 of the 20 are going to show on page 1, which means 7 of those are on page 2. But realistically, you don't have 13 spots because you've got AutoTrader and Cars.com and other things that are aggregate sites that'll show up. So realistically, there's probably 7 or 8 spots on page 1 for dealers, which means there's 12 or 13 spots left over, and there's only 10 results on page 2. So a couple of people are all the way back on page 3 where no customer's ever going to find them. And then if you're in the video goes in even crazier, if you're in a big metro area, sometimes you're looking at a couple of hundred dealerships fighting for those 7 or 8 spots. You got to do SEO if you want to show up. And you need to be paying attention to the annual study or almost annual study that's conducted called the Local Search Ranking Factors Study. Now, I did a video here that explains the study and shares the results. This came out at the end of last year. They actually skipped 2019. So we went from a 2018 study to a 2020 study, but they basically take the top 35 to 40 experts across the world in local search, the people that are really in this day in and day out. And they ask a lot of questions about positive factors, negative factors, competitive factors, and things like that. And then they can aggregate all the answers because nobody knows what's in Google's algorithm. But all of these people are in it so heavy every day. They have a pretty good understanding of, hey, if I tweak this dial here, then that's probably going to give me a positive boost. Then they aggregate everything together and you get a couple of cool pie charts. Also, full disclosure, I am one of the people on that list, and I have been for years. It is a pretty in-depth thing. It takes about 3 hours to actually do the whole study. So you get a nice pie chart. Actually, you get 2 pie charts now. So one shows you the factors that influence your visibility showing up in the map pack or showing up in a Google Maps search. So right here, you can see Google My Business is the biggest factor there. And then you've got another that shows what signals are going to influence when you show up in just the standard organic links. So this is almost like your basic guide for local SEO. This is the local SEO Bible. This is what you need to do. This should guide your own efforts in SEO if you've got somebody in-house, or this should be something that your vendor is paying attention to, because this tells you, hey, this is what matters right now for showing up in searches. So today, for the rest of the presentation, got about an hour and a half left. I'm going to talk about the most important signals that influence your visibility and what you need to do to influence those signals. So the really big things that are going to make a difference on how you show up in searches: your website content, the links pointed to your site from other websites, your Google My Business profile, and the reviews that you collect from customers. Now, before we dive into those, I need to talk about Google's upcoming update. Google, like I said, does thousands of updates a year, but they're going to pre-announce the updates that are going to make waves. They're going to really affect a lot of the sites that are in search results. So Google is releasing this update called the Page Experience Update. Now, it was supposed to roll out in May. They told us last year, hey, we're going to put out this Page Experience Update. Here's what's involved. It's going to come out in May. But then right at the end of April, Google said, hey, guess what? We're going to push this off to the end of June, and then it's going to be a slow rollout, and it's going to take a couple of months for this to happen. But this update is really, really important within automotive, and I'll explain why. It doesn't focus on specific things like content or links. It focuses on what it's like as a customer to use your website. So it's customer experience and what Google calls the core web vitals, which are some metrics that it started talking about a year ago. So let's explain what those are. Core web vitals, the three important things that you need to know are typically acronyms. The first one is LCP, which is largest contentful paint. Now, when you're running a core web vitals test using any of the tools out there, I'll talk about a couple in a minute, that test is running on the specific URL that you're putting in. So if you just put in your URL of dealership.com, it's looking at your homepage. So you need to run this for individual pages. It doesn't look at the whole site. It looks at each individual page. Largest contentful paint is the biggest element that has to be rendered or painted on the page. So if we're looking at the homepage of your dealership website, it's going to be whatever that big slideshow image is right at the top. That big hero image, it's a big, nice image of a car or the dealership, whatever. Those are typically really large. They take the longest to render in the browser. Now, keep in mind, when you read stuff like this, it's going to be very generalized for every website out there. It doesn't mean this is accurate information for car dealers because Google says you should target 2.5 seconds of load time or faster. But we all know that car dealership sites are by nature very visual in nature. We need to show the cars. We need to show the quality of the dealership. You're going to have larger photos. If you load this onto a VDP, it's going to be a really longer load time because you're loading in 50 or 60 photos, which you need to do and is expected with that website experience. So realistically here, what we're suggesting is everybody target 6 seconds or faster. As long as you're in that range of 6 seconds or faster, you're pretty much okay and you don't have to worry about something. The second one, FID, which is first input delay. Once you type the URL in and the browser starts to make the calls to the server and build that page, how long does it take till I can click on something? How long until that page is interactive? Now, Google's saying you want to target 100 milliseconds or faster. That's actually true. You want your site to be clickable as fast as humanly possible. Anything much longer than this, you're going to start having problems and see a dip in visibility once this update is added. And then the last one, CLS, Cumulative Layout Shift. That's as the page loads, how much of the text moves around. So for instance, we've got the big hero image in your slideshow. If the text starts loading as that image is loading in and it shows up here, but then once the image loads, that text bumps down, that's a layout shift. As you know, third-party tools might be adding in your chat widgets or whatever. If things have to shift around because new elements are being loaded in, that's a layout shift. So you want to target the lowest number possible when you're looking at this score. But it's also, besides the core web vitals, looking at customer experience signals. So I'm going to walk through these so you understand as well. Mobile friendliness is one of the big ones. This means you got to be on a responsive site, which unfortunately, I hate calling out names, but that's going to be a problem for dealer.com because they don't have responsive sites. They're still adaptive. They call it adaptive responsive, but it's different code. It's not the same code that feeds a mobile site and a desktop site. That's going to be a problem. You've got to have a responsive site. It's also looking at click distance. So you know how it is. If there's a menu and you're on your phone and you're doing this and you have to like get your finger just right to click that submenu button or that menu button because they're too close together, that's a bad mobile experience as well. So Google's going to be looking at all of that. So keep in mind, you have to be on a responsive site platform. This is absolutely important. Safe browsing is also important. So we don't want to land as customers on a site that's been hacked and has a bunch of links to porn sites or Cialis and Viagra or gambling sites, or even worse, land on a site that's been hacked and has malware on it. So It's always been something that Google's kind of given you, Chrome will give you a warning. Hey, this site's not a safe site. But now if your site's been hacked and you've got those links or you've got malware, you're going to drop out of search results. That's not usually something we're going to have to worry about too much. Most providers are pretty good about security. HTTPS is a big one. This is secure browsing. So this is something that's been around for years. We've been talking about this 5-6 years at least. And Google said this is a small signal and they rolled it out. Now it's really being turned up as far as how much this signal matters. And you'd think it'd be silly to be talking about this now in 2021, but I talked to a dealership 2 weeks ago that still didn't have HTTPS. They were just HTTP. Don't know how that happened because they were on a provider that usually does HTTPS, but you need to go check this, make sure your site is secure. Really important. And then this is the biggest one that is the most important for dealerships. Intrusive interstitials. That's a really fancy techie way of saying annoying ass pop-ups. When you have a pop-up that appears with no other interaction. Now, a lot of providers have what we call behavioral targeting or behavioral pop-ups, where if I have exit intent, my mouse goes off the top of the screen like I'm going to close the browser window or type in another URL. Then a pop-up appears and says, hey, wait, don't leave. We'll give you $500 off or something like that. Those are okay. Intrusive interstitials are the pop-ups that happen as soon as I land on the page before I've even done anything. So if you've got a COVID warning that pops up and says, hey, it's COVID, but we're still open, that's bad. If you've got chat pop-ups that pop up automatically when I land on a page, that's going to be bad as well. Google does not want you to have pop-ups that appear automatically when people land on a page, or you're going to start getting penalized. This is huge because most dealerships have chat pop-ups and internal alerts and all kinds of crazy offers and things like that. That's going to be really problematic once this update has rolled out. So you can check your core web vitals with Google's Page Speed Insights tool and other tools as well. Now, Page Speed Insights, a lot of people have known about for a while. You get a score of how your site performs on mobile and desktop, but Page Speed Insights is really focused more on the code, not on really actual load speed, even though they've kind of added it in. But what I like to use is a tool called webpagetest.org. The cool thing about this one is it's going to check your core web vitals, but it's also going to check true, actual, real-life load speed. But it also gives you what's called a waterfall graphic. So it's going to show every single call to the server. So if you do have a really bad first input delay, then you'll see here's how long it takes to get this stuff loaded. Or let's say you've got largest contentful paint. You've got some big image on the screen. Well, you'll see because it's going to show a bar for that image and how long it took to load that. So that waterfall graphic is really helpful. And like I mentioned earlier, some of this stuff is really generic. You got to be careful when you're using tools and things like site graders because they're really generalized for every possible site out there, and they're not specific to one particular vertical. And specifically, they're not really paying attention to just what you need as an auto dealer. So you want to check your site, use these tools. There's actually now a report inside of Search Console that lets you check core web vitals and friendliness signals. Check your sites. Check your dealership site, talk to your website provider, make sure they're on top of this change, talk to your digital marketing providers. If you've got digital marketing providers doing your SEO, make sure they're on top of this change and that they're ready for this change so that you don't lose visibility when this update rolls out. You've got to be sure you're ready. So let's talk about website content. This is really kind of the base of how you show up as a search result. If you don't have the content that answers the question, you're not going to show up as a search result. Now, the big problem here is that a lot of SEO is kind of in the code and behind the scenes. And so it's hard as a business owner to really understand what's going on because you don't see obvious deliverables. And years ago, Google said, hey, we like fresh content. So a lot of SEO providers, both within automotive and outside of automotive, have kind of fallen into the cadence of equating adding content to your site with doing SEO. So the problem here is Google doesn't care how much quality you or how much content you have. It cares what the quality of that content is. So it's not about quantity. So avoid providers that promise you massive amounts of content. There's providers out there that say, we'll give you 20 pages of content a month. All right, cool. What's the strategy there? Because at the end of the year, that means you've added 240 pages to your website. And we're not talking blog content. We're talking pages. You've added 240 pages to your site with what strategy? How do they even know that you need that? You need quality pages, not a quantity of pages. So that's really important to understand. SEO is much more than just adding new content to your site. A study was done by a company called McKinsey that shows the attributes that customers are using to select the local businesses that they want to do business with. There's 3 new attributes that people are using now that they hadn't been using before. Number 1, how close is it to my home? We talked about this earlier in other studies. The second one, hygiene. Is this a safe place for me to go shop? And then the third one, also related to safety, are there going to be a lot of lines there? Or is there still space for safe physical distancing? Now, sure, we're all getting vaccinated now. We're coming, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic, but also there's a lot of people that don't want to get vaccinated for one reason or another, and that's their right. But that also means that we're still probably going to need social distancing and masks for a while and extra cleaning and things like that. So customers still care about that. Even if you at the dealership don't really care, your customers care. So you have to worry about these 3 attributions. Now, luckily, all 3 of those are very easily solved with the content that's on your website. You need to make sure that the content on your site is actually about your dealership and about the local area. And most of the time, most dealerships have really generic content that could pretty much be on any dealership's website anywhere in the country. So make sure it's actually about your dealership and what's awesome about you and why people should buy from you and not competitors, and also about your local area so it's clear that you're a part of that local area. In fact, here's a test that we use. It's a really easy test. You can do this on your homepage, your about page, whatever it would be. Change the name of your dealership and change your city. And then think, if I change those to another dealership's name and put that dealership's location city in instead of my own city, would that content work on that dealership's website? If it would, that means your content's not very good, because it shouldn't work on another website if you're only changing the name in the city. So there's a video about this one too that goes a little bit more in depth and talks about the importance here. So for sure, you want to go and check that out. Now, it's important to add COVID related content as well. So you want to make sure that you're adding your COVID content so that people understand the safety procedures and any additional areas of service or alternate areas of service that your dealership offers. And a banner or a pop-up isn't enough. And actually, you should know now a pop-up's probably not going to be good, because you don't want that due to Google's update that's coming. You need a dedicated COVID page on your site, a page that says, hey, here's what we do. And you need to link to that page from every other page. You need to have information about whatever COVID safety precautions you've implemented at the dealership. And you need to outline any alternate service options, special hours for seniors, pickup and delivery, things like that. Now, also, when it comes to your content, once you've written all this awesome content about your dealership and local area and about COVID and all that, you want to make sure that it sounds conversational. That's what Google wants to see. And that's also going to help you with that user experience side of things when customers are comparing you to competitors. And this is a big pitfall. A lot of times people are going to stuff keywords because they want to write for Google, but you need to write for humans. Everything on your site should sound like something that you would say face-to-face to a customer that just walked in the front door of the dealership. So the way that you test it, read your content out loud. Physically say it out loud to see what it sounds like. And there's a video here about it. But this is campfire story time. I love to tell the little campfire stories. You should know that if you see me speak before. Years and years ago, we were going to work with a Ford dealer in Dallas. And before we worked with them, their content sounded something like this. If you want to buy a Ford truck in Dallas, come to our Ford pickup headquarters in Dallas, where we sell more Ford pickups in Dallas than any other dealer that sells Ford pickups in Dallas. So when you're ready to buy that next Ford pickup, come to our Ford pickup headquarters in downtown Dallas, and we'll get you the deal of your life on a Ford pickup. The guy that wrote that was thinking, holy crap, we're going to rank for Ford pickups in Dallas. But every human that read it is going, geez, what's wrong with these guys? And another thing that dealers tend to do is they'll say, hey, welcome to our site. We also serve customers in Plano, Richardson, Garland, McKinney, Allen, the Colony, Frisco, and list off 20 or 30 cities. I talked to a dealership a few weeks ago that they had 36 cities listed in a comma-separated list on the homepage of their site. If I just walked in the front door of your dealership and your sales guy said that to me, you'd whoop that guy up the back of his head. That is not something that somebody that's already standing in your dealership needs to know. Same thing. If they're already on your website, they don't care. And the kicker is, listing a bunch of cities in a comma separated list is not going to help your website show up in those cities. So stop doing it. And you'll catch that when you read your stuff out loud. So again, boiling down to the simplest concept, if you want to rank for something that someone's typing in as a search phrase, You need a page on your website that's about that concept. Now, this isn't the old school early days of SEO where you need a page about every single keyword. It's not that anymore. It's about the concept. Google's smart enough to understand that the concept is what's important, but you need a page about that concept. And that page needs to be the best answer. So it's not just about, well, I need a page about oil changes, so let me throw up a page about oil changes. You got to have an awesome page about oil changes and why it's important and why you're a great solution for that. So it's really important to understand you need that page about that concept, and that page needs to be the best answer, but not just the best answer to the one question, but it needs to also answer all the subsequent questions that will come up once the customer has the answer to that initial question. That's the kind of content that's going to rank better in Google searches. And I mentioned oil changes for a reason, because most dealerships are severely lacking when it comes to fixed ops content. You'll have one service scheduler page that probably has an iframed service scheduling widget in it, and that's all you've got. You don't actually have anything on your site about oil changes or tire rotations or battery replacement or windshield wipers. And that's why all the quick stop lube shops are outranking your dealership for oil changes, because you don't even have oil changes anywhere on your site. Or maybe you've got it in a bulleted list of here's all the services that we provide. You've got to have a page about every concept. And as you're creating your content, you need to think, what is the reason that you can provide to Google for being the best answer? Or more simply, why do you deserve to rank? Because if we're looking at a town that has a whole lot of dealerships in it, every dealership thinks that they're the best. Every dealership thinks that they should be number one and that their competitors shouldn't outrank them, but there's only one number one. So as you're writing your content, think to yourself, why are you the best? Why should people not even consider going to another dealership? If you truly answer that question, and I'm not talking about stuff like we're a one price, no negotiation dealership, or we're family owned, or we have a shiny new showroom, because guess what? Everybody else says the same crap. Truly answer the question, why are you the best option? Why do you deserve to rank as the number one search result? And that makes it really easy to write awesome, unique content that's actually about your dealership. Once you've written that content, remember, write for humans, have that concept, but then you need to optimize that content to better show Google what that content is about, so Google can really discover it and understand what's going on. Again, boiling down to simple concepts, Google's kind of like a child. Google has an understanding at a basic level of a lot of different things and has an intense curiosity to learn, but you still kind of have to hold Google's hand and say, hey, this is what this is all really about. So you got to make things painfully obvious to Google, and that's where optimization comes into play. And when you're optimizing, you want to make sure you're including location terms to really hit it home that this is where this dealership is located. So I'm going to run through those various page elements and what you need to do to optimize those page elements. Now, this is not looking at the entire site. This is talking about individual pages within your site. The most weighted element on the page is the title tag. It's what shows up in the browser, up at the very top, above where you're typing in your URL, usually in the little tab. It's also what populates your blue link when you show up as a search result in Google. It should be a summary of the page. It's called the title tag. It's the most weighted element on the page. You should never put your dealership name first, because you're the only dealership name that. So anytime somebody searches for your dealership name, you're already going to rank number one. Don't waste optimization space putting your dealership name first on every page of the site. Put your targeted keyword phrase and then also your city and state abbreviation. Now, keep in mind, as I go through these various page elements, we're talking about a single page, and each time I say keyword, you need the same keyword phrase in each of these elements. You don't want to say pre-owned cars, pre-owned vehicles, used cars, used vehicles. You need the same phrase every time. So title tag, most important. Second most important, your H1 heading. Now, H1 is a designation. There's H1, H2, H3, H4, just various types of headings. You should only have one H1 on the page. Can you have more? Sure, you can, but you're much better off having a single H1 and then using other H2, H3 designations for other subheadings in the page. The H1 should be a little bit closer to conversational. It should be like a newspaper headline, explain what this page is about. It should have the same targeted keyword phrase, and it should have your city and state abbreviation. Please make sure you have an H1. There are a few providers out there that won't necessarily do that on every page of your site, and that can be problematic. Then obviously it's important to have the targeted keyword phrase and your geolocation phrase in the content of the page, but we've already talked at length about having content that's about you and about the local area, so you should already have that locked down. All of the platforms allow you to set custom URLs for the pages of your site, so always try to get the keyword phrase and your location phrase into the URL of the page. Great example here. Out of the box, your used car page is probably going to be something like dealership.com/search-used.aspx or dealership.com/search-pre-owned, all one word. It'd be much better off at dealership.com/used-cars-dallas-tx. Better signal for Google, better signal for human users. Make sure you're using dashes to separate your words, not underscores. Also, image alt text, it's really important. Now, I mentioned I started talking about this stuff way back in 2011 at Digital Dealer. And if you were to go back and watch that presentation, you'd laugh because I had nowhere near the design skills I have now. But one of the things that I used to talk about back in the day is, hey, Google can't tell what's in an image when you have an image on your page. So alt text is part of the embed code that explains, hey, here's what's in the image. Well, that's not true anymore. Google has machine learning systems that are really intelligent and can pretty accurately tell you what's in an image on the page, but alt text is still a signal in the algorithm. And it's something that a lot of dealerships and a lot of marketers don't really pay attention to. And so it's a great way to add additional relevancy and add additional locational relevancy. Another important part here is this is becoming an accessibility issue. Anyone that is blind, that is using a screen reading browser, that browser that is a screen reader is only going to read the text and it can't tell you what's in an image, but it will read what's in the alt text. Now, sure, we all think that it's silly that a blind person is looking for a car on a car dealer's website, but there have already been lawsuits out there from people that are suing because dealerships don't have alt text on their images. And it's crazy, but it's happening. So to protect yourself from lawsuits, you want to have that alt text on the images. It's actually a compliance issue for VW already. It's probably going to roll out to the rest of the OEMs very shortly. So make sure you've got that locked down. Meta description is also important. This is behind the scenes code. This is what's going to populate those 3 or 4 gray sentences underneath your blue link when you show up as a Google search result. Now, the content of the meta description has no bearing on ranking. It is not paid attention to at all by the algorithm, but because of the fact that it shows up as that description underneath your blue link in Google, you need to think about it like it's an advertisement. You want to write something that is compelling, something that will entice people to click through. So matching that keyword phrase is going to help get you more clicks. Now, you want to make sure that you're optimizing for how people actually search. You don't want to use dealership jargon because customers don't use the same terminology that those of us in the automotive business use. So the best example here, a lot of dealers like to say that they sell pre-owned vehicles because it sounds nicer than saying used cars. But customers don't search for pre-owned vehicles. Customers search for used cars. So if we look at the volume here, this is using AdWords keyword planner tool to tell us what approximately the monthly search volume looks like every month for these 2 phrases. So pre-owned vehicles and pre-dash-owned vehicles and pre-owned all one word vehicles basically is counted as the same thing for Google. So nationwide, the entire US, on average, there are 2,900 searches a month for pre-owned vehicles. There are 823,000 searches a month for used cars. So you want to make sure you're optimizing for used cars so that you'll show up for searches for used cars, so that those customers that are looking for you are going to find you. It's like 223 times more searches than pre-owned vehicles. If you're a Mercedes dealership, be careful though, because Mercedes is actually a compliance issue. You have to say pre-owned vehicles, which hopefully we can talk to the right people high enough up at Mercedes and say, hey, look, this is really bad for SEO. We need to fix this. You absolutely need to have a blog, which is crazy because one of the biggest website providers out there doesn't include a blog unless you buy a higher website package, which is silly in today's world. You absolutely need a blog and you need to post to that blog on a regular basis. Now, what's a regular basis? It's whatever you can sustain, but you need to be adding regular content there. And the blog is important because there's a difference in the types of content that you need to be putting out to answer these potential questions and build the right kind of experience on your site. The content that goes in the main section of your site is different than the kind of content that you would put on your blog, and both are really necessary to answer all of those questions. And there's also a difference between content that's going to directly lead to the generation of revenue, like you're going to get a lead from this content, or content that's just kind of there for informational purposes because that person's earlier in the funnel and they're going to come back later and convert on another page. Both are important and both are why you need a blog. And your blog shouldn't be all about your dealership and what you do, because why would anybody care? You need to be more helpful, more relevant to the local area. In fact, you want to make your blog a local destination, somewhere that people in the local area are going to continue to come back to because you've got awesome information. That's what's important. So you want to put out content about the local area. In fact, that content doesn't even need to be something related to your dealership. Now, not all your blog content, obviously you need content about the dealership, but in fact, for the clients that we work with, the dealerships that we work with, half of the blog posts that we put out every month are just about the local area. They're helpful, useful, relevant posts about the local area because that builds local relevancy and it keeps people coming back that will be exposed to the dealership website, even though they're not in the market to buy right now, but it makes it more likely you're going to catch those people later. If you need some ideas, if you're kind of new to this concept and you need some ideas, I have a video. Surprise, surprise. You're probably tired of video links already, but bit.ly/local-blog-ideas walks you through 10 really cool ideas that you can use as a springboard to write some awesome localized content. And then a lot of dealerships want to expand beyond just their location and show up in the larger metro area or just the larger area if they're more rural. Before you try to expand and show up in nearby areas, you've got to be sure that you own your own backyard. And what I'm saying there is you need to have a strong enough signal to Google that you are dominating search results in the town where you're actually located before you start trying to expand and show up in other towns, because location is a huge signal to Google. And if you don't have enough of a signal, enough of a pattern to Google's pattern detection that you're a great answer where you're actually located, you do not have the foundation that you're going to need to be able to beat dealers in nearby towns that are actually in those towns. So watch this for sure. This is a really important concept that a lot of dealers and a lot of marketers don't understand. You have to own your backyard before you start expanding. But then when you're ready to expand, if you're in a less competitive area, it's more rural, or maybe you're Volvo and there's not a lot of Volvo dealerships or something like that, a couple of city pages is probably all you're going to need. And there's a video there that walks you through the city page concept, where it's a single page for a single city about a certain concept. If you're in a more competitive area or a denser metro area, you're going to need a more advanced strategy, and that's called local content silos. So bit.ly/local-SEO-content-silos is the video that walks you through the whole concept here. Now, city pages will work fairly quickly, but in the more competitive markets, it's going to take more oomph. You're going to need the local content silo. Local content silos are going to take significantly longer to work, sometimes up to a year, for you to put out enough signals and build this silo up well enough to start getting a lot of traction there. But it works. It just takes a long time and it's a lot of effort. I just want to make sure you understand that caveat. So that's the end of the content section. Thanks for sticking with me through all that. I know it's a lot longer than my usual, but hopefully you learned some awesome stuff. Otherwise, the high five is going to get a bit awkward. Don't forget to come back next week for the second half of the presentation. But for now, that's all the time we've got left for today. So you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-five because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays.